Welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. When you're ready to transform your sales for today's transforming market, we've got you covered with your host, the queen of cold calling and founder of Salesology, award-winning author, speaker, sales trainer, and coach, Wendy Weiss.
Hi, this is Wendy Weiss, and welcome to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. And I am your host. I am the founder of Salesology and the Salesology Prospecting Method. I'm also known as the queen of cold calling. And today, our very special guest, my very special guest, is Chet Lovegren. And he is the founder and head sales RXer at the Sales Doctor RX. He has over 11 years of sales and sales leadership experience. Chet started the Sales Doctor in 2020 as a way of providing a prescriptive approach to revenue problems and struggling go-to-market strategies. Chet has helped build out sales processes and teams that lead to companies successfully raising over $100 million in venture capital funds. He follows a prescriptive approach to solving revenue problems and provides go-to-market professionals with the right dose of practical and tactical information needed to stop the revenue bleed from archaic practices and methods. So welcome, Chet. I am so happy to have you here on the Salesology Conversations with Sales Leaders podcast.
Woo! And two things, Wendy. Thank you. Number one, thanks for getting through all the marketing jargon. I get to a point where I tell, the fractionals I work with, can I just call myself a consultant? But now you got to add so many layers to it. So you did a great job with that intro. Number two, I'm thinking about, can I start saying 102.5 million? It's just such a weird number, but we just had a customer we work with mid last year raised 2.5 million in seed money. So we were pretty excited. They call it seed money, but they still have revenue. So I still don't know how founders correctly clarify their rounds, because I always thought you had to have a little no revenue to get seed money, but I guess that's what you can call it if it's pre-series A. So it's still a weird number. So I appreciate you getting the 100 million out there, but we have a recent success story that we're pretty excited with, and we continue to grow. So thanks for having me, and happy to share any insights with your listeners that are possible.
Okay, wonderful. And it is your official bio, so plug in the number. That's your number.
Such a weird number. We're going to have to plug it in.
Yeah.
We got to hit the next milestone to make it make sense.
Yeah. So I did the official introduction. So let's get the backstory here. How did you end up in sales? How did you end up being the sales doctor? What's the story? What's the background?
Well, I'm probably going to disappoint people, because like any salesperson, sales leader, consultant, trainer in the go-to-market space, it's probably like most other people. I kind of just fell backwards into it. I don't think I was 8 years old going, I want to be in sales someday. Actually grew up in a very conservative Christian household, was raised in church my entire life, thought that pursuing, some form of preaching and pastoral duties was going to be my way. Even went to Bible college. I have a degree in pastoral studies with a minor in grief counseling. Grief counseling was always something that I thought, I think enjoyed is a bad word, because you don't want to enjoy grief, but I felt it was where I could make the most impact. And after just doing that for a while, it just didn't really work out the way that I thought it would. And I had a career change in mind and different things that I wanted to pursue, and made a complete 180, moved to Los Angeles and joined the entertainment industry, and, spent 5 years doing that as well. Learned all the ins and outs of that, decided it wasn't for me, and met somebody who kind of shaped my sales career from there. Gave me my first sales job, official, I would call B2B sales job. I had done some sales in college and was an assistant general manager of a tuxedo shop and selling formal business wear and attire, but gave me my first official B2B job. And then the rest is kind of history up to the point of founding the Sales Doctor, which is they say you can't give yourself your own title. but it is a self-proclaimed title, the moniker, the sales doctor. And it was really just birthed out of the idea that, unfortunately, most sellers are like most medical practitioners. You sit around for 45 minutes to an hour to get in a room with someone for 2 minutes who just plugs all your information on a tablet and says this, and this, and it either works or it doesn't. It doesn't feel like there's too much commitment from your average medical professional these days. And I think sellers are the same way. We listen to a couple pain points and we kind of deliver the diagnosis that we want and that we feel just based on what we initially hear. And we don't dig deep enough and understand if, the pain isn't maybe part of a bigger core problem. And that's kind of my commitment, is to provide that prescriptive approach, because at the end of the day, a doctor who provides a diagnosis without proper examination is guilty of malpractice. And just a lot of sellers and a lot of sales leaders are guilty of this themselves these days. And I'm not to say I'm a perfect person. I struggle with things from time to time, but that was kind of the commitment of the sales doctor, is to, get very prescriptive and tactical with everything we do, not just say, oh, this is the 3 keys to leadership, this, and this. Okay, but like, how do you do that? How do you work backwards to figure out who are your builders, maintainers, departers? How do you understand the lexicon of the people that you're working with? How do you tie personal goals back to professional outcomes to ensure accountability? And so it's something I pride myself on. It's sometimes the data and the information inundates people, but eat the fish and spit out the bones. I'd rather give you 3 times as much info you need to get you 80% of the way there than to give you surface level insights and have you scratching your head going, okay, but what's the how behind it all?
Okay, well, so I'll bite. How do you get prescriptive with your clients?
Well, it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about just general discovery, I think the important thing to call out when you're having that initial conversation with a prospect who you're looking to sign on as a customer is, everybody says you want to find their challenge. And I see so many onboarding plans that go, this is how we just start a discovery call. Wendy, thanks for having a call with me today. So what's got you having a conversation with a sales doctor? What's going on in your business? What keeps you up at night? If I could wave a magic wand, what would you want to solve in your business? And to me, that's a very lazy way to approach sales. Most common because it's probably very easy and people won't forget it. But 2, it also doesn't establish any trust. If I came into a business as the sales doctor, someone who's going to fix your revenue health, and I said, what's your challenge? I'm also going to get a service level answer. Well, you need to make more money. If I ask my prospects that 10 times out of 10, that's what I'm going to hear. But it also makes someone go, well, how can I validate that you know what you're doing and that I can trust you with my business and I can pay you these sums of money to get something in return? A better way to do this is to say, hey, look, I talk to sales leaders all the time, and I realize that they struggle typically in one of 3 key areas: X, Y, and Z. And it's plug and play. You can do it anywhere. You sell logistics software. Hey, I work with logistics companies. I talk to logistics leaders all day long, and I realize that in their business, even in a perfect world, they struggle in one of 3 key areas: this, and this. If everything stayed the same, but one had to be different, which would it be? And now that person goes, holy cow, those 3 things you just listed are things that I face all the time. All of them are actually things that I struggle with, but it's a lot to fix all of those things at once. So now you're setting them at ease, saying, just pick one to focus on. Let's start there, baby steps. And once you have that initial pain point, you can start to demonstrate how you're going to solve that pain point. And then the cherry on top of the sundae, the whipped cream, the sprinkles are the other 2 pain points that they're struggling with. Because let's be honest, every company probably struggles with those 3 pain points, but you don't want to give them everything to change right now. Because if you read the book Immunity to Change, too much too soon gives people paralysis analysis. You lead with that biggest thing that's front and center on their mind to demonstrate that ROI, and then to increase the value of what you're going to add. Then you rope in and show them on your demo or your presentation how you can solve these other pain points. Those are kind of an afterthought because, again, you don't want to inundate them with too much, but it's like, hey, if I can just solve one thing over the next 6 months, and this is the thing that you think is most important, here's the value of that. Here's the ROI versus what you're going to have to invest with me to get that done. But also keep in mind, I want to show you how these other 2 things that are $50, $60, $70, $100,000 problems as well, can be solved. Now I'm taking a $50,000 pain point and I'm selling you a solution or a service that's going to solve a $150,000 problem. And now you're not only fixing now, but you're future proofing their business. You're future proofing the other problems that they could experience. If you're a seller or a sales leader and you're wondering, well, how can we figure out what that looks like? What does that crystal ball look like when someone works with us? Go talk to your customer success team, go talk to your support team, listen to calls, listen to quarterly business reviews that they have with your customers, and see how their customers are talking about your product, how they're using your product. And it's not as simple as just reading a case study that marketing created. Go actually have those conversations with people who are working on the front lines of customers that have been using your solution and service for 6 to 12 months. All the people that renew after year one, year one churn is a big focus for businesses. Talk to the people who have decided to renew after their first year and the customer success managers that are managing those accounts. See how they're talking about the challenges that they face. See how they're talking about your product, service, solution, whatever we want to call it, whatever you're selling, and then mold that into your conversation, because not only are you going to increase the ROI of what you're providing, but you're also going to gain trust by the person that you're talking to, because you're showing them that, hey, I know you, I know your industry, I know what you're going through. You're not just showing up and saying, tell me what your problems are, and I'll find a way to shove my service or solution into it and fix it for you based on what you tell me. Sell to me. I hate the have your prospects sell to you thing. It's I don't know. I'm very passionate about that. And it just really frustrates me, because we should be demonstrating our subject matter expertise.
Well, I'm going to push back just a little bit on what you said out of the gate, in that I'm certainly not a big fan of asking someone what keeps you up at night or what are your challenges, because that is a recipe to get a very canned response. But there's nothing at all the matter with asking, why are we talking? What made you decide to want to talk to me today? And getting some information up front from a prospect, which then can certainly lead into everything that you just talked about. And I am 100% on board with you about the importance of talking to prospects, talking to existing clients. You and I were having a very, very interesting conversation about cold calling, a subject near and dear to my heart, before I hit record. And I'm curious about your take, because so many people think cold calling is dead. And I don't happen to think so. And it seems that you don't either. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. And again, I think all in context, right? I totally agree with you. Inbound, if someone's coming to you, it might make sense because they're probably looking at other vendors. They have some awareness on the problem that they're facing, and they might be able to expand. But definitely, if you show up to a true cold outbound discovery call and ask someone why they're here, it's like, well, you called me. You offered some options in some areas where you might be able to help me. Let's dig into that further. And you're right. Cold calling is not dead, but it's definitely on life support. And it's on life support for a couple different reasons. First one is, with all the tools and technology that have come and all the things around social selling and create content to generate leads, you can definitely do that. Those are different buckets that you should be putting time towards to help supplement your efforts. But we've given reps the ability to live behind their screen. Oh, there's AI email writing tools and email writing assistants, and social selling on LinkedIn is a huge buzzword that still exists. And while that stuff works, it's so much faster just to call someone and have a conversation and get to know as fast as possible. Going for no is always the start of a conversation. And if you wait until you send 5 canned emails over, 10 business days, that's a lot longer than if you send 1 intro email, do a LinkedIn touch, and then call them a day or 2 after that. And now you've done 3 touch points in 2 days instead of waiting for 3 emails to go out over the course of 5 days to get you to your 4th and 5th email by that 10th day. So I think, one, it's just become so much easier for people to live behind a screen. I also don't want to blame the modern workforce too much, but there's also a big misunderstanding that, 50% of millennials and Gen Z have self-identified as introverts. And picking up the phone and having a conversation with a stranger is absolutely terrifying. So how do you make it less terrifying? Well, think about what most onboarding plans are when it comes to cold calling. We show reps what good looks like. And I just think that's important, but the wrong way to do things. I would rather show you more of what bad looks like, and more importantly, highlight what bad looks like for my top sellers. Because now, even though Chet's headed a president's club, I just heard a cold call where he got totally destroyed. So me as a new person at the company, I feel more comfortable going and making a cold call, because even Mr. Perfect, the guy who's heading the president's club at the top of our leaderboard, the sales doctor, messes up as well. Plus, you can learn a lot more from your failures than you can your wins. Think about, in sports analogy. So sorry if anybody feels alienated, but we all know who Michael Jordan is. We all know who Tom Brady is. They didn't win every single time they went to the championship. They had multiple losses. They had periods of failure. And that failure wasn't a total failure, because they learned from it and they learned how to overcome it, and they learned how to fix the areas of their game that wasn't working so that they could get to success. Oprah, she failed a lot in her life for a very long time until she finally saw success. And all those failures were her learning, okay, this doesn't work. Okay, this worked, but then I did this and that didn't work. And so there's so much focus in onboarding on execution and perfection of execution. But we all know that perfect is the enemy of good. And so I don't think that in onboarding we highlight that enough. And then the third thing is, I just don't think that enablement is there in the way that we train people and coach them to execute well. And most scripts, if we're getting really granular, are written with the idea that we're still selling to people in the 80s, and people talk differently. People want to receive information differently. We are the microwave cognizant of short form content. People don't want to have a 5-minute sales conversation, 6 minutes, 7, 8. Your cold calls should be 2 to 3 minutes max. Your goal is to establish contact with someone, identify if there's an area of opportunity, and then gain an agreement to have a further conversation. On all my cold calls in my scripts, I tell people the second I confirm that I'm talking to who I'm talking to, I go, hey, Wendy, fantastic. Listen, I only have 2 minutes before I have to hop into my next call, but I wanted to reach out to you really quick. Here's why. And now I'm setting the expectation that I'm not going to sit here and talk to you for 20 minutes about your problem on a cold call. I literally just want to give you a little information on why it is I do what I do and who I work with. And if that aligns with any one of your number one initiatives, or even maybe a 2 or 3 level initiative, would it make sense to grab 15 minutes over the next 2 weeks sometime to discuss this further and show you the results we've had and how we got our customers there. And once that's complete, we're gravy. It's all about discovery. But unfortunately, a lot of sales orgs are like, they want to have these super robust, in-depth sales conversations on that cold call. And that's just not the point of a cold call. And I think those 3 things, living behind a screen, too much focus on perfection, and then too robust of a script during an enablement, people just don't feel comfortable making those cold calls, and they don't execute even halfway decent. And that's what's leading to people just going, cold calling doesn't work. Nobody wants to buy anything.
Chet, there's an awful lot to unpack there. I do want to share with all of our listeners, any millennials that might be listening, or sales managers, business owners, sales leaders that manage millennials. I'm an introvert. It can be done. So, and we're going to pause now for a moment for a word from our sponsor. But then when we come back, I want to dig a little bit more deeply into what you were saying about the onboarding process and coaching new hires and all of that good stuff. But now, a word from our sponsor, the Salesology Vault. And just about every guest that I have interviewed on the Salesology Conversations with Sales Leaders podcast has had a free gift for our listeners. As a matter of fact, Chet, my guest today, Chet Lovegren, he has a gift for our listeners. And so what we've done is we've taken all of those gifts and we have put them all in one place just for you. We call it the Salesology Vault, and it is packed full of free gifts from sales leaders sales experts, marketing gurus, revenue generation gurus. And we add another gift every single week. When we release a podcast, which we do every Monday, we add a gift. So you can log in as often as you'd like, download as many gifts as you'd like. It's all free. So go to bit.ly/gift vault, or the link to the Salesology Vault is in the show notes. So as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes, click on the link, download your gifts. You'll be glad you did. And we are back with my special guest, Chet Lovegren, who is the founder and head sales RXer of the Sales Doctor RX. And I want to continue on, Chet, with the conversation that we were just having about cold calling and onboarding. And I kind of like to get your take on this, because I was very interested in what you were saying about so many organizations want to have these really long cold calls. And to me, prospecting and selling, or getting that appointment and then having the discovery call, those are two completely different skill sets. And it seems to me that people often lose focus on what it is they're trying to accomplish. And if you're prospecting or you're cold calling, you're pretty much just trying to qualify the opportunity and get the appointment. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that, to what you see that goes wrong, and what sales leaders that manage a sales team, an outbound team, how they might get them to be more effective.
I think you hit the nail on the head. People need to remember that your cold call is a qualification call. I talk to the right person, the right company, with some tiny little shred of potential in terms of what I can do for them. Especially if you're thinking about companies that have full cycle sellers, people that are prospecting, cold calling, handling the discovery appointment, working the full funnel on their cold outreach. We tend to do that, but it works just as well. People would go, I hear people all the time in full cycle sales go, well, why wouldn't, if they already connected with me there, why would I set a separate time to have a call? Because you're catching them out of the blue and they're not expecting to give you 15, 20, 30 minutes of their time right now. You're not going to have effective discovery. We're calling them during their workday. They did not schedule this call. This is an interruption to their day. And so we want to give them the right environment to have that next conversation. Now, especially if you're talking about companies that segment their outreach. So, some sort of development rep is doing the outreach. We're going to pass that off to a seller once that initial appointment is set. It makes even more sense there, because in those orgs, typically the person that's making the cold call is a lot, I wouldn't say lower on the totem pole, they're just less experienced, right? They have less sales and business acumen. They have less experience on handling objections. So it's really important to just do what you can within the skill set that you're given to set that next person up for success for a more in-depth conversation. But the problem is it's never the right time when you reach someone out of the blue to have that full-fledged conversation. And unfortunately, a lot of people think you're adding a friction point by having that next call, that next conversation, that next call scheduled. And I just don't think that's true. Like, look, if they don't want to give you another 15 to 20 minutes at a separate time that's more convenient for them, because they can actually schedule a future call and have that time where they're sitting there ready to listen and have that dialogue, do you really think that person's going to go all the way through your sales funnel then? Right. So it also creates what I've heard a couple of my friends, and I love this term, called deal inertia. We don't want to create unnecessary steps, but the more commitment and requirement we get from our prospect, the more they've done some work with us, the more prone they are to not just want to throw all that work away. They're more prone they are to want to see this work all the way through. It's one of the reasons I tell people that when you're working enterprise deals and you understand how they go about buying software, you think about MEDDIC, the sales framework. What is your decision process in this? What is your criteria for this? Are we going to need to go through an IT checklist and a vendor approval form? having that stuff done ahead of the demo is a great way to kind of set the stakes that it's like, hey, if we want to take this seriously, let's get the stuff that I typically hear as a time blocker when we're ready to send the contract. Let's get that stuff done now, because there's really no difference between doing it between discovery and demo and doing it, between demo and contract out. There's no difference. You literally just send me the paperwork. My team looks at it, make sure that the NDA is signed for you, and then we can move forward. It's the people that are hesitant on that, where you have to think, well, if you're hesitant to do all that stuff, then maybe you're not very serious about buying. And I get now we're in this economic climate where every opportunity to people feels like, sifting tiny little bits of gold in a riverbed. And so we want to take whatever we can get. But I think that desperation can also come off to prospects very quickly. And when you sound and seem desperate, it kind of scares them away, because we're supposed to be subject matter experts. We're supposed to be confident, and people don't want to buy a solution or service from someone who's scraping at the barrel to get whatever they can get. So when you're enabling and onboarding people, yes, I think more importantly, just in your process as a whole, there needs to be that delineation, as you called out, between, hey, the goal of this is to qualify. The next goal is to discover and understand and have a conversation. What is going to make this make sense? 3 months down the road, 30 days down the road, whatever your sales cycle is, why are we going to end up purchasing this software or buying this service? And more importantly, who's going to be affected by this implementation? Who's going to need to quantify the ROI? All those good things that we love to talk about in discovery. But to the point of cold calling, yeah, you're totally on point there. It needs to be created in the process. This is qualification when we first reach out to them. Nobody's expecting to have a sales conversation, and we need to respect their time.
Yes. And I liked what you said earlier about scripting, because what I find, in addition to scripts that sound like they were written in the 80s, is scripts that sound like they were written by a marketing department that's never talked to a human being. And so lots of times companies will put in their scripts selling type language. It's cold calling script, which again, the goal is qualify the opportunity, nail down the appointment. And my definition of the word appointment is a prospect agrees to have an in-depth conversation with you about whatever it is you're selling at another time. Maybe it's a Zoom call, maybe you get in your car and you go see them, maybe it's on the phone, but they agree to talk to you. So companies will use language in their cold calling scripts that the prospects interpret as that appointment setter wants them to make a buying decision right then and there.
Mm-hmm.
And that is problematic.
Yeah, and you're asking them to do more than they're willing to handle right now. Could I be in use of some fractional marketing services, some on and off page SEO for my company? Yeah, but if you called me and tried to have that sales conversation right now, let's say I get off this podcast and I'm doing some admin work and somebody does that, I'm not going to be in that frame of mind. But if you intrigue me and you demonstrate that you know the problems that I have, and hey, this is why people have worked for us, where does that rank in what you're working with right now, and what you're focused on? Yeah, I might want to have a future conversation with you about it. So let's set a time where I can actually sit down and digest the information. I think it's something that we do in discovery too, where people get too in depth with their line of questioning and it feels more like an interrogation instead of a conversation. And that's just because, as sales leaders, we want to get all the boxes checked. And it's tough when you're not actually doing the job every day. You're responsible for the people responsible for the job, to look and see, maybe we need 30 questions answered. How do we find a way to only ask 5 questions? Because some of these questions will answer multiple questions that we have. And so in terms of building your enablement program, I would always recommend, take your top 2 reps, do a 9-box exercise, look in the upper right quadrant as close as you can get, and find those 2 reps that you can lean on to help you create those scripts, create those discovery call questions and the discovery call outline that you're using, because those are the people that are going to be your best source of information. And like for me, I still do the sales job, especially as an entrepreneur. I don't make 125 cold calls a day like I used to in 2015, So the people that are making 125 cold calls a day are going to be a better source of information for me to craft whatever internally that we're using when we reach out for cold calling. What I'm responsible for is understanding my framework and my methodology that I want to implement that into my plug and play. Hey, when we talk about a perfect world scenarios, what are the 3 key things that people are talking about? What are the 3 things most important right now? And I just don't think that we do that enough. We go, hey, I was a great seller, and that's why I'm a sales leader now. So we're going to do it this way, instead of roping in the people early and often that are actually doing the job, who are going to have a better source of feedback for us and help us better craft the exact words and the questions that we're asking in our framework or methodology.
Well, I am really enjoying our conversation today, Chet. I have been on a personal mission to stamp out the myth of the born salesperson, that there are just like people that somehow intuitively know what to do and what to say. I love that you are talking about process and data. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. They say, you can't manage what you don't measure, And so if you're not capturing the data points and working with the people that are responsible for capturing the data points, and I even have to learn that. I go into organizations, and sometimes I'm like, hey, reality is I've never sold AI machine learning products to manufacturing companies, but I can take a methodology that works. I can take a framework for a call that works and turn it over to them and build that script, build that discovery call outline with them, using the psychology behind sales and the things that I know that work. And the fact that I have all this learning experience of my own failures, where, why I spend an extra month in procurement with this enterprise deal? It's because I failed to do this, this, and this. So we want to make sure that we get that done early in our sales process. And I think that's the big benefit of, people like you and me, who are not just, hey, let me show you what works because it worked for me in the past. It's, hey, this is our methodology that we use. And the great thing about a good methodology is, for the most part, 90% of it can be plug and play. But I need your help to work with you in a done with you mentality to make this actionable and give us the ability to execute consistently, right? In a way that's scalable, and not just letting everybody go hodgepodge. Recent customer that I'm working with, it kind of blew my mind when I sat on 4 different discovery calls. I'm like, nobody does things a set way. And that's good for the individual. Like, I think you should let your personality shine. You should use your skill set as necessary. But it's like, some people are using upfront contracts, some people aren't, some people are using medics, some people aren't. Like, we got to figure out what works for our prospect, and we got to make that consistent. And if it doesn't work over time, that's the beauty of A/B testing. You make these little incremental changes and you see what the difference is, positive or negative. And then you can recalibrate from there. Hey, we realized that this actually didn't work the way that we thought it was. We're going to try something different, or we're going to take it back to basics and what we were doing here, but maybe we use a little bit of this other thing that we were thinking about doing. Nothing has to stay the same. And I think, flying a plane and building it at the same time is such a great example to use in how it feels to work in sales. Even when you're a very tenured company, I've worked with Zscaler, Extra Hop. I mean, these are well-known cybersecurity companies, one of them publicly traded. They're still experimenting. They still do things differently time over time, and they adjust to the economy and the climate. And, we all went work from home a few years ago. That was a big thing that companies like that had to adjust for. How do you manage remote employees? Nobody had the best answer. You have to do that. You have to be adaptable. And change is tough. Nobody likes change, but hey, it's like Billy Bean in Moneyball. He says, adapt or die. And everybody's adopted the Moneyball mentality in baseball, and look at the way it is now.
Yes. And my one of my old ballet teachers used to say, if you fall down, you're doing it wrong. So I love what you're saying here, Chet. And so I know you have a gift. You have a gift for our listeners. So would you share with us some details?
Yeah, we have, like everybody and their mother, a newsletter, weekly newsletter, where I would say we specialize in, or really, have a lot of pride in what we do, is we try to make it incredibly actionable and very short. There are a lot of great newsletters out there. We're not trying to be the next Morning Brew. We're not going to send you a laundry list of articles and throw a bunch of graphics in there and external links and things like that. We try to literally make our content fit on the first page of your phone screen when you open it up. So quick, actionable weekly tips, condensed down, very digestible. And yeah, it's a good time. It's a fun thing to do. It's fun to get the responses. It's fun to get messages from people on LinkedIn and say, hey, these are the other couple newsletters I follow, but I got to tell you, yours is one of my favorite. It makes it worth it. So you can definitely subscribe. And if you get the first two and you hate it, you can always unsubscribe. It doesn't cost you anything.
There you go. And we will post the link to the Sales Doctor RX newsletter in the show notes. So as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes, click on the link. And Chet, if someone wants to connect with you beyond this podcast, where can they find you?
LinkedIn is a great place. I have links to everything else, all my resources there. You can also check out my website as well. And there's some forms where you can contact me there. So website or LinkedIn, either or.
Okay, perfect. And again, we will be posting Chet's LinkedIn link and also the link to his website in the show notes. So if you want to connect with Chet, as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes, click on the link. And thank you all for listening to the Salesology Conversations with Sales Leaders podcast with my very special guest, Chet Lovegren. And if you have found value in listening to today's podcast, then please think about one business owner, one entrepreneur, one sales leader that you know that you think might also find value in listening to today's podcast. And please do share the link with them. And until we meet again, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, really large bills.
You've been listening to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. Be sure to follow so that you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review and be sure to share it with your friends. Tune in every week for more exciting insights and wisdom on transforming sales. And until next time, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, very large bills.